Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is Ash Quest, and today I'm very excited to unbox a retro, nay, a vintage board game that actually was not a classic game, but was based on a very classic, very well-loved game that we all know. This is the Hyrule Fantasy Zelda no Densetsu game, a game produced by Bandai in 1986. This board game is a fully fledged board game with all of the qualifications and part of the Party Joy, specifically Party Joy 61 series of games produced by Bandai around this time. It is, of course, based on the very first Legend of Zelda game produced for the Family Computer Disk System, known in Japan as the Famicom and known to the rest of the world as the Nintendo Entertainment System. This game is, again, part of a series of Party Joy games that are very small, compact games based on a variety of different properties, and Bandai made quite a few of them based on video games. There are actually 3 or 4 based just completely on the first Super Mario games that came out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. So that makes these highly collectible, and there is actually another game based on Zelda. There are actually a couple of games based on Zelda. This is the truest to the IP, I would say. There is another Party Joy game with the same size and form factor based on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Legend of Zelda game, A Link to the Past. Now, I got this from eBay. Of course, it was from a Japanese seller, and it is actually missing just a few components. It is incomplete. However, the components that it is missing can be easily proxied. I think we are just missing heart tiles and a couple of other tiles that would represent things like swords and give the indication that the player has collected a specific thing for this game. It does very closely actually follow the flow and story, what little of it there is, of the video game. But enough of that, let's unbox our very first Party Joy game, the Hyrule Fantasy. Now, this has a small form factor that all the Party Joy games have, and I would say that that's largely based on the fact that real estate is a pretty high value commodity in a metropolitan area such as Tokyo, even back in the mid-80s. This has a plastic case. As soon as we open the cardboard one, and I'm really happy about that because everything is nice and protected, although this curiously opens up, and we'll find out why here very shortly. We have our gameplay manual, and we have the board on which the game is played. This is actually double-sided, and I'll show you both sides of it here soon. Underneath our flap, we actually have our miniatures for the game, and yes, you've probably recognized him from afar. This is Link, the protagonist of every Legend of Zelda game. These miniatures are actually quite rubbery. They remind me a lot of the MUSCLE miniatures in how flexible and rubbery they are. They're not going to break. You can drop them, you can bend them, you can give them little squishes, even though this rubber was vulcanized sometime in the 1980s. We've even got some lovely kanji still perfectly legible along the bottom of the base. We've got 4 different colors because this game is for 2 to 4 players, but every player plays their own Link, and you're kind of all going on the same quest to conquer the 8 dungeons and destroy Ganon to save the Princess Zelda. The game originally came with all of these tiles to be punched out of their sheet, and we have a variety of different tiles here that we'll go over soon. Mini cue cards, which give you the bosses for each dungeon, and this deck of Taiketsu cards. So these are all of the enemies and different sort of events that can happen throughout your travels in Hyrule. The game also comes with what they call sub-boards. These are actually the player boards, and all of the players will be able to keep track of all of their collectible items and how many pieces of the Triforce they have collected throughout their journey, as well as how many hearts they have. Sadly, the heart tiles were one of the things missing from this copy of the game. The game also came with a cube and 6 stickers. It was one of those that you had to put the stickers onto the dice, but this was done in a very practical way. Instead of having 6 individual stickers, you had 2 stickers that would cover 3 sections of the die. So I really like that they did things that way. This particular die is a D6, so 6 faces with a 1 and bomb, 2 and arrow, 3 and recorder, 4 and magic staff or fire rod, 5, or sword, and 6, or light arrow. The light arrows being, of course, absolutely necessary to kill the Demon King Ganon. The The instruction book is simple and detailed enough to teach you how to play the game. It consists of just this foldout that is 8 pages altogether. There is a very handy map here in section 8 that tells you where all of the different levels are and what the symbols and explanations on the board itself mean. And I was able to use Google Lens to translate a lot of this manual just kind of on the fly while I was looking for different pieces of information. And from what I can tell, this will be a somewhat easy to learn game. It should actually flow pretty fast once everybody has the idea of what to do. Now, I am not confident enough to tell you how to play it at this time, but I do plan on going over this again in a future video where I can go over all the ins and outs. Finally, we have the board, and this is vintage 1986 cardboard. I'm going to be very careful with it, but it follows the unfold in a Z and then unfold lengthwise convention. I think this has been in storage for a long time because the board is nice and stiff, but it wants to go back to its original folded up shape. So if I want to play this with any practicality at all, I'm going to have to set something heavy on top of this while it's unfolded. But I'll go ahead and show you a close-up of all of the sections of this reverse side of the board. Section 1 gives you the prologue, the actual story of The Legend of Zelda, or at least the first game in this long-running series, and all of the players will take on the role of the protagonist, Link. We now get to see the cast of characters in the Hyrule Fantasy Legend of Zelda, including all of the monsters and bosses you will fight in this game. Incidentally, this also serves as a perfect bestiary for the actual video game as well, so you can get all of the details for the monsters in the video games. They did not disrespect this IP whatsoever. In fact, they gave it the ideal treatment. On the front of the board is your actual space with all of the tiles, and yes, every single one of these tiles is based on a legitimate screen from The Legend of Zelda. This essentially comprises the entire in-game map for The Legend of Zelda. We are just missing the dungeon maps, as it were, but those did not come with this game because this game does not have dungeon maps. This game approaches the completion of the dungeons in a different way. All of the players will start here on the tile marked Start or Stato and be able to move across all of the tiles, getting to the different levels. Classically, level 1 is not far at all from the beginning of the game if you know where to look, and is home to the dreaded Aquamentus. From what I can glean from the instructions, a player will have to make sufficient use of the die. There are challenges to overcome by rolling this die in order to get through the dungeon, which the player does by landing on the tile and then rolling the appropriate face on the die, and then a secondary challenge in which the player must roll the correct face on the die to challenge and defeat the boss. The player will survive various challenges going from level to level or dungeon to dungeon until they are able to conquer level 8. After level 8, they'll be able to challenge Ganon, who has his own tile for this game. And yes, this is the art that was based on the very first game. He did look extremely similar to this, but in pixel form. The first player to challenge and beat Ganon will be able to flip this tile over, giving us this adorable and very appropriate art of our hero Link and the beautiful Princess Zelda holding up their Triforces. I'll show you selections of the tiles, a bit of how they're placed on the subboards, and all of the cards that come with this game. The bosses, a bit out of order. Aquamentus, Dodongo, Manhandla, known here as Teschitat, Gleok, Digdogger, Goma, Patra, and Lanmola. Classically, each dungeon comes with not only a Triforce, but a special tool or weapon that you can use to traverse the overworld, as well as different sections of old and new dungeons alike. We have here the red candle, the raft, the magical boomerang, the fire rod, the ladder, the recorder, the boomerang and bow, and the book and key. You will obtain an assortment of items that will help you on your quest, including the Kusidi or red potion. This is worth 100 rupees. Esa or bait. This is worth 50 rupees. And the blue potion, which is worth 50 rupees. There are dungeon maps, 50 rupee pieces, 100 rupee pieces, and the sword. Now, if you are acquiring a copy of this game, you should have 4 subboards, and you should have enough heart tiles to fill every space on all 4 of these subboards. You should have 4 of every Triforce and corresponding item on the reverse side, and you should have at least 4 copies of every one of the item tiles. This is so every single player has the ability to get one of these tiles and place it on their board to show their progress in the game. This game does also come with shield tokens, which I am sadly missing, as well as blue ring and power bracelet tokens. All of the tokens that you acquire will actually go on your subboard like this, so you can see what you have acquired at a glance and be able to tell where you will be able to go next on the board to further your progress. We got a monster meat stick or a bait, which these are used to lure monsters in the video game. We've got the piece of Triforce from dungeon number 4, which is the ladder, so I'll put that there. And this is just generally how you'll build your subboard or your character board. The last thing to really go over are these encounter cards. Each one has a name, an illustration, and the effect of the card. And they come in a couple different varieties, with some of them being things that happen and just taking effect, and others being actual monsters that the player has to battle. Here we have the blue moblin. I believe this card is asking if you'd like to play a game where you can bet money, which of course comes with its own rules. An encounter with an Armos, a surprise moblin attack, a regular moblin, the dreaded Lionel, powerful centaurs that have the ability to attack Link at range. Another encounter, Reba, the common Octorok, Ji-san, another Lionel, this time a red one to contrast our blue one, another moblin ambush, a blue Octorok, a Tektite, a Zora, the Zora were beautiful even back then, a blue Tektite, a Peahat, yes, that's what these annoying things are called, a blue Reba, a Genie, a blank card. One of these is blank. That must be intentional, though. Boulders falling, a whirlwind, and another Zora, identical to the first one that I drew. We have an assortment of these square tiles that I believe are supposed to be drawn at random, because although they have the same backs, they have different fronts. It looks like you have a high chance of obtaining one of these elder ladies. I think she's a shopkeep. Whenever you venture into one of the caves in the overworld, perhaps, and then one that is this elder gentleman, and then one more that is this wicked moblin. Just one of each of those, so a really low chance of getting those. So those are the contents in their entirety of the Hyrule Fantasy. I'm really happy to own this game because I really, really love The Legend of Zelda, and I'm going to work on getting myself some very suitable, classy looking tiles to represent the heart tokens as well as the chits that I am missing. I hope to have gameplay of this for you in the future, and if so, I'll try to get some rules down and modified so that I can somehow play this solo, because I believe that there is a way to simply play and lose to the monsters, which would normally kick a person out of the game, leaving the remaining players closer to winning, but in this case, a solo gameplay would be winnable and losable without any other players. If there is a sort of mechanic by which other players can use cards against you, then that can easily be solved by drawing cards by themselves and sort of playing a game of chance with oneself. But for now, I hope that you enjoyed this vintage unboxing. Please let me know if you'd like to see more like this. And as for me, I'm certain that I will be collecting more of these awesome Party Joy games from Bandai. Comment anything you'd wish down below, and I'll see you in the next one, brave heroes. Until then, bye for now.